So creatine, most people have heard of creatine. It's the best studied, most effective sports supplement there is. It kind of seems boring to some people these days, and they want to move on to the next supplement coming down the line that's really exciting. But the fact is, creatine works as well or better than anything that's ever been discovered for increasing short-term bursts of explosive energy performance, and it also improves general recovery. And most people, when they take creatine, put on, say, 1 to 5 kilos of lean mass. If you're loading, you can put that on in 5 or 6 days. And it's lean mass, none of it's fat. Arguably, some of it's water, and that's arguable from the research. I've talked face to face with the world's leading researchers on creatine, and there's no proof that a lot of the weight from creatine is water. So you actually have quite a strong response going on here with creatine. There's hundreds of studies in creatine in human beings now. The majority of them show a significant effect. Creatine's found in especially fish. Herring is the highest for, if you're ever doing sport nutrition trivia, herring is the highest source of creatine in the diet, because creatine's only found in meat and fish. Again, if you've got a vegan or a vegetarian client, they're going to do, and they want to build muscle, or even if they just want to recover better or perform better, vegans do really well on creatine. You'll be their hero forever if you give them creatine if they're a vegan, because they'll see massive results. But on the other hand, it kind of begs the question: if vegans are always going to be deficient in B12 unless they supplement, and they're always going to be deficient in creatine if they don't eat meat, should they really be a vegan? Just a philosophical question there. Body produces creatine naturally from magnesium, arginine, methionine, arginine, and glycine. So your body produces it if you don't get it in the diet, but it only produces a bare minimum amount. And the first creatine product, everyone thinks, oh, all these sports supplements, they come from the USA, all these clever American researchers. Well, actually, the first creatine product was developed by a guy named Roger Harris up at Nottingham University, and he's a British guy, and he's actually a total genius too. He's the smartest guy in sport nutrition that ever lived, probably. And the first product was Jack Point 1, a British product. And Linford Christie was on it when Linford Christie won his Olympic gold medal. They figure most of those guys, or half of them, were on creatine. And if you do the research and look at how much creatine improves performance, Linford Christie probably wouldn't have won that race. He probably would have come in 4th, 5th, or 6th if he wasn't taking creatine. So he has creatine to thank for the chunk of gold on his trophy table. How to take creatine? Should you load creatine or should you not load creatine? The advantage to creatine loading. Now, loading is if you take a high dose for 4 days, and then you take a maintenance dose thereafter. So you take 4 or 5 servings of 5 grams for 5 days or 4 days, and you're loaded. So you're saturated the muscle. And then if you take a maintenance dose, you can keep that maximum level in the muscle chronically after you've loaded. So the advantage to loading is that you see the results very quickly, and you can evaluate how your body responds to creatine. But you don't have to load. You can take 3 or 4 grams a day for 30 days, and you'll still creatine load after 30 days. It just takes a lot longer. Some evidence shows you're better off maybe with 3 grams twice a day as opposed to 5 grams once a day. Now, when it comes to creatine, insulin really helps with the uptake and retention and absorption of creatine in the muscle. So if you take your creatine with a good amount of carbs, now some evidence shows you get an even better effect if you take your creatine with a big whack of carbs. And it's probably best to take it right after a workout. So when you're taking your creatine, take it with meals, especially your highest carb meal, ideally your post-workout shake that has a lot of carbs. Probably your highest carb meal should be your post-workout shake anyhow. So take your creatine with that. And there's some tricky little, you can actually take, interestingly, if you take 90 grams of carbs with your creatine, 75 probably works as well as 90. So we'll say 75, because that ends up being a lot of carbs or a lot of sugar. So take 75 grams of carbs with your creatine. That's the amount you need. to get maximum uptake. Now, you can also take, they did some research, 50 grams of protein and 50 grams of carbs. So if you want a little less carbs and more protein, probably if you had 30 grams of protein, 35 grams of protein, 50 grams of carbs, you get 98% of the effect. So that's I'd want to be somewhere around there. There's some interesting things you can take that are nutrients. Some would call some of them foods, spices you can take that increase insulin function. So you might even be able to get away with less carbs, right? So your insulin will work better, so you have to have less carbs to get the same effect. And those are lipoic acid. You can take about 200 to 400 milligrams of lipoic acid with your creatine. That'll help with uptake. Or you can take cinnamon, and that depends on the extract you're taking. So if it's a strong extract, you probably take a very small amount of cinnamon. If you're just taking regular old cinnamon spice, probably half a teaspoon. And you can take green tea. So all these things will make your insulin work better. And if your insulin works better, you should retain more creatine. Effects, again, we talked about the lean gains, 1 to 5 kilos of lean gains, depending which study you look at, which subject you look at. Obviously, as with any supplement, any workout program, genetics, you give 2 people the same workout program, 2 people the same supplement, they're going to respond differently. Some people are just really lucky, they pick their parents very well, and they respond really well to certain supplements, really well to workouts, and some people aren't so fortunate. It's the same thing about that guy in class that's the genius in maths. He picked his parents well. He probably works very hard, but he probably picked his parents well too. Creatine works really well for repetitive power exercises. So, if you're doing sets of exercise, doing 10, 20 reps, you're going to get more reps on your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th set if you're on creatine, because your creatine stores won't deplete as quickly. And creatine is your short-term, your 10-second, 15-second energy source, right? So after your first set, if you got enough carbs in you, should be all right. Doesn't really do that much, but after your 2nd, 3rd, 4th set, it's going to really help things. Now sprints, if you're doing sprints, say 100-meter sprints, you're exhausting your creatine before you even finish the sprint. So creatine will help you on your first sprint if you're doing a full, all-out, 100-meter sprint. So it's intense exercise performance. Now, for endurance people, creatine might have a recovery effect between workouts, a muscle maintenance effect, so it might help quite a bit with them too. Do we have to speed up a bit? 2 minutes? Whoa, okay, we're going to speed up a lot. Okay, so we talked about creatine enough, really. Is it safe? There's hundreds of studies on creatine. There's published safety reviews by the American College of Sport Medicine, several expert roundtable reviews. It's even being used now to treat diseases in old people and children. So creatine is not only safe, but there's some research to start showing that if you don't have a higher, more saturated dose of creatine, you're probably at a health disadvantage as well as a performance disadvantage. Are there myths about creatine? You have to cycle it. We talked about that. You don't have to cycle it. Creatine's safe. Creatine monohydrate we're talking about. Water, bloat. A lot of people say you get bloated. You'll carry extra water with creatine. Not been proven. When they do biopsies, when they take skin and muscle out of patients, they don't actually show any increase in water retention under the skin. So that's a myth. Do you get cramps? No, the only study on cramps that's ever shown a difference, there were fewer cramps in the creatine group. And some of the other creatines, creatine monohydrate has the best research, and fortunately it's the cheapest one, so use creatine monohydrate if you're given the choice.